When the clock strikes midnight and December 31st becomes January 1st, it seems that we are all inspired by the prospect of a fresh start. New years, new beginnings, new me. In my case, last January, I embarked on a new challenge with millions of people across the globe, maybe even with some of you here in the audience. I vowed to get serious about exercise. Bursting with this New Year's motivation, I jumped out of bed before sunrise, put on Rocky Balboa's gray sweatsuit, and rode my bike to a tiny exercise facility in an old Chinese neighborhood known as the Hongqiao Exercise Park. By the time I reached the park, I was still under the trance that I was an anime protagonist, ready to outwork everyone else in 2022 and attain incredible results. Unfortunately, my daydream was shattered as I walked through the rusting gates of the park, only to find out that every single piece of equipment had been conquered by the rulers of public parks. Old Chinese grandpas. 6 in the morning on a Saturday, on the first day of the year, temperature below freezing. You could imagine how amazed I was that anyone was working out at this time. Never mind a bunch of fragile grandpas. But as I took a closer look, I realized that these grandpas weren't fragile at all. Far from it. Their arms were twice the size of mine, their chests pumped and swollen, and you could see the striation of their back muscles through their thin nylon shirts. As I watched them perform incredible feats of strength, one grandpa in particular, who I presume to be the leader of the gang, performed 15 pull-ups with complete ease and took off his shirt to reveal a physique that I'd only previously seen on social media. This was Grandpa Shu Chong, and much of what I want to communicate with you today about exercise was inspired by him. After we both introduced each other's names to each other, I couldn't help but ask how he maintained this incredible physique at a rather late stage in his life. Grandpa Shu Chong responded that he had been exercising every morning for the past 40 years. 40 years. That's 14,600 mornings. This man had been exercising for twice as long as I had been alive for. So I then asked, amazed for a second time, how he maintained the consistency and discipline required to pull off such a feat. And the response he gave me that day was what pushed me to return every morning to that park for the month-long winter vacation, to exercise 5 to 6 times a week for the past 14 months, and to unlock my great passion for lifting weights. And just as Grandpa Shu Chong had done for me that day, I intend to condense 40 years worth of wisdom into this 15-minute talk, hoping to give you all a bit of inspiration through his 3 tips to long-term exercise and my own experiences in implementing them. But before we move on to these 3 tips, we need to first understand why we might exercise in the first place. We might say, oh, I want to become faster, I want to become more flexible, I want to become stronger. And while these are all certainly very viable and popular reasons as to why people exercise, we all know the number one incentive. Especially with the prevalence of social media, most of us work out because, in some way or another, we want to look better. I for sure began because of my skinniness and my skin problems, and I can't count the number of times that my friends have asked me, how do I lose stomach fat? Or how do I broaden my shoulders? While certainly, in an ideal world, we shouldn't have to deal with these insecurities in the first place. We should love ourselves for the way that we are, regardless of our physical attributes. But since we've been placed in a hypercritical world that causes us to become judgmental of ourselves, we can strive to conquer our insecurities head-on, rather than just brood them. To give myself as an example, through consistent efforts, I was able to shed my insecurities and attain a new self that is more attractive to 2 kinds of people. Myself and other dudes in the gym. Furthermore, the benefits of exercise go far beyond just the way you look. Health professionals state that if exercise could be prescribed as a single pill you take once a day, it would be a medical revelation, a magic drug. decreased risk of type 2 diabetes, obesity, cardiovascular disease, stroke, increased brain function, stamina, respiration, the list goes on, and these are just the physiological benefits. Psychologically, exercise has been shown to reduce stress, anxiety, depression, while enhancing mood control, self-confidence, and general happiness. But here's the catch that we're all aware of. It's hard. Our minds are wired to enjoy quick and easy things, but unfortunately, exercise is the polar opposite of quick and easy. You might not see any changes in your physique after the first month, 2 months, half a year, or even 1 full year of working out. And each training session may be gruesome and tiring as you pant for air after a sprint or struggle as you get that last rep up. Fortunately, each of the 3 tips that I'm about to discuss have sought to reduce these sources of resistance. They have made exercise more practicable, fun, and consistent throughout my journey. I'll primarily discuss these tips in the context of lifting weights, as has been my primary mode of fitness. I believe that these tenets can be applied to all forms of long-term exercise, not just in lifting weights. So with that in mind, let's move on to the first point. The first lesson that Grandpa Shu Chong taught me was to find joy in small wins. And to illustrate this point, I'd like to raise an analogy with something that, especially as Asians, a lot of us are familiar with: academics. High school, for many of us, its primary goal is to get into a prestigious university and to pursue a higher education. But on the road to that goal, we have to endure countless hours of schoolwork, extracurriculars, standardized tests, and internships. So instead of bombarding our minds every day throughout the 4 years of high school with the thought of a dream university, we tend to take things one step at a time, don't we? We focus on daily, short-term goals that give us the momentum to reach an ultimate objective. Like, for instance, doing well on a quiz that you studied hard for, or successfully leading a club meeting. It's these short-term objectives that compound into a better shot at reaching that college acceptance. Now let's return to exercise. Exercise, just like high school, is a long-term pursuit, but unlike high school, there's no universal curriculum to exercise. There aren't any quizzes or tests, nor do you get a numerical score after each workout. And it is this that makes it easier to fall into the trap of stressing too much about your dream physique, your dream weight, or your dream strength, and being discouraged by the fact that you're not even close to reaching it. Grandpa Shu Chong told me that when he first began, he could barely hold onto the bar for longer than 10 seconds. But as he went out and trained every day, holding onto that bar for dear life, each second of improvement that he made was like a trophy that fueled his motivation to go on. And eventually, he not only developed the upper body strength to hold on for long periods of time, but to be able to perform his very first pull-up. And it is this pull-up that led to another and another, and eventually leading him to perform 15 with complete ease. So from this, we can realize that we need to build small, short-term goals that give us small wins to track short-term progress. Just like the high schooler would feel proud and satisfaction when reaching these accomplishments. Like, for instance, track your body weight and feel proud that you were able to lose 0.5 kgs compared to the previous week. Track your strength and feel proud that you performed 1 more bench press repetition compared to the previous session. In fact, it is this act of incrementally increasing the intensity of your workouts, known as progressive overload, that is the scientifically backed method for efficient strength progress. It's almost as if this idea builds the curriculum behind lifting and exercise. And when you look back, you'll realize just how far you've gotten from these incremental achievements. Grandpa Shu Chong's second lesson involved him pointing at his other friends in the park and telling me to embrace the exercise community. Now, this point is interesting because one of the most dominant reasons as to why people avoid going to the gym is because they're afraid of being judged. They feel like they'll be ridiculed for going to the gym as someone who's overweight, underweight, weak, or just unathletic. It's that painful feeling of not belonging. And this, in fact, was the reason why I didn't get a gym membership when starting out, but instead went to a local Chinese park. But as I communicated with the grandpas regularly, I realized that they were some of the most kind and encouraging people that I had ever met. From complimenting me on my puny build to suggesting new fun exercises. They were a constant source of motivation, encouragement, and most importantly, laughter. But I still wasn't convinced that my preconception of the fitness community was untrue. Because, after all, grandpas are all usually quite gentle. And we all have that stereotype of the self-absorbed gym bro who's flexed himself on every car window. But as I scoured through online communities and social media threads, I realized that the grandpa's positivity was quite universal. Videos of overweight people transforming their bodies was met with overwhelming positivity, with comments like, "We're all gonna make it," or "You're an inspiration." And beginners like myself were met with open-armed congratulations for starting out on their fitness journey, and paragraphs after paragraphs of advice on proper nutrition, exercise, and rest. And when I finally stepped foot into the gym for the very first time, since that moment, I can't count the number of times that I was met with enthusiastic help with an exercise, or a fist bump for breaking a new personal record. If you think about it, it makes complete sense for the fitness community to be so supportive. Especially with lifting, fitness in itself, inherently, is a battle with your past self. You're striving to become better than you were from last year, last month, last week, or even yesterday. And since we're doing it for ourselves and we're all in it for ourselves, we can realize that we can all be each other's teammates in this journey. We can all lift each other up and strive to become better together. And more experienced individuals can see themselves in the shoes of newcomers, which is why they're so keen to help. They've once been in that position, and they've once received the advice that they're now passing on. So if you're afraid of stepping into the gym, stepping into the track, or stepping into that fitness class because you feel like you don't belong there, don't let this hold you back. Because I believe that you'll be surprised by just how many people are willing to cheer you on and support you on your journey. Grandpa Shu Chong's third and final lesson was to associate your identity with fitness. He told me that when he first began, even with these incremental achievements, he still found it incredibly difficult to continue and wanted to quit many times. But as people like myself began acknowledging his efforts, as people around him began praising him for his physique and his fitness, he not only developed a sense of self-confidence, but a sense of pride that he was in the person that he was becoming. He felt prideful that he was upholding this healthy lifestyle in the first place, and it was this pride that pushed him to persevere for decades as a fitness enthusiast. Exercise had transformed from mere chore into a crucial puzzle piece in his identity. To illustrate this point further, imagine a man trying to quit smoking once and for all. In the first few weeks when starting out, when asked to smoke, he might give a hesitant, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." But as he rejects his cigarettes over and over and over again, his response develops into a confident, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker." So why does this change occur? As he gained confidence in his increasing streak of days without a cigarette, it became exponentially easier to say no than the very first time. Even though nothing changed on the outside, he's still rejecting a cigarette as he did since day one. It was the fact that he had this identity and pride to uphold as a non-smoker that gave him a sense of responsibility to continue. So from this, we can realize that we can tear down the barrier to exercise through a slight change in perspective. If we constantly tell ourselves that we are someone who takes care of themselves, and surround ourselves with an open and supportive community that tells us the same, then we can allow this identity as a healthy individual to build up and to crystallize. But in the opposite direction, if we constantly tell ourselves that we love junk food, that we hate working out, and we're just unathletic, we begin to accept these statements as things that are definitive and set. That is just the way that we're built. And these statements develop into obstacles that keep us from enacting on any change because we've grown too comfortable in remaining in this position and upholding this harmful identity. We've become the reality that we project to ourselves. So in order to build constructive lifestyles out of destructive ones, we need to treat each action as evidence. Remember the short-term goals that I talked about earlier? Each of these small wins should go on what I would call your internal identity resume, a list of reasons as to why your identity should change from A to B, from unhealthy to healthy. As we repeat the process of going to the gym and eating healthy over and over and over again, we can build this identity and allow it to develop into something much greater. And not only does this develop an identity, but with each repetition, it gives us a sense of pride in the person that we're trying to become. And as this pride also builds up, exercise and fitness will become something that is much easier to repeat and much harder to skip. So in conclusion, here are Grandpa Shu Chong's 3 tips that he told me on that New Year's Day. 1, to find joy in small wins. 2, to embrace the exercise community. And 3, to associate your identity with fitness. Now remember how I talked about smoking and student life throughout my speech? Well, believe it or not, there's a reason as to why I incorporated these analogies. It's because I believe that these tenets can be used to create constructive lifestyles of any kind, not just in exercise and fitness. Like for instance, I realized that the development that I went through as a student paralleled that of my passion for lifting. Ever since I began exercising consistently, I realized that I began appreciating these short-term academic achievements much more. I realized that I began receiving a lot more inspiration from the surrounding student community and trying to do my little bit to give back a bit of inspiration. And I realized that I began striving much harder as a student leader, which is why I'm delivering this talk in the first place. And to anyone trying to make a change for the better in their lives, whether it's exercising consistently or cutting out a bad habit like smoking, I believe that Grandpa Shu Chong's 3 tips can help you achieve that goal. Now, before I wrap up my TED Talk, I'd like to leave one final idea for you all to consider. This is the reason why I know for a fact that even if my passion for lifting doesn't endure, I'll still keep up a healthy lifestyle for the rest of my life. And this fact is that while we can replace the phones in your pockets or the cars that are parked outside, and even the people in your lives that are sitting next to you may come and go, the body that we have right now is the only body we'll live with for the rest of our time on earth. And I believe that this fact makes it far too precious not to take care of. So let's all strive to become the best versions of ourselves today. Thank you.